welcome to our fifth forum. Senator Moore and myself are here this morning. First, there was an article in this morning's paper from the governor concerning the budget and anticipated cuts. Senator, would you like to elaborate a little bit on that?
I guess I have no choice with the situation we're in. Yeah, it's actually pretty depressing news. You know, July we had revenue estimates that came in about $24 million below the estimates, revenue estimates. August came in at $58 million above the revenue estimates. So everyone was kind of watching September as a benchmark, hoping that we would break even, or at least maybe come close to meeting the benchmarks. And we actually came in, I think it was $250 million below. So they came out with their revised revenue projections, which have the state at being roughly $600 million below expectations for the year, this fiscal year. So we're currently, the governor released yesterday that he's looking for some help from the unions. He's asking the state unions to take, I believe, 11 furlough days, freeze their cost of living increases, and if they do that, we could be looking at saving 2,000 jobs. If they don't agree to these adjustments in their contract, he's going to have to lay off 2,000 people by October 30th. I think he's also looking at going to non-union personnel and looking for 9 to 11 furlough days also. But also a reference in there that Massachusetts is not the only state. Every state in the country saw revenue expectations fall below projections. So this is not just a Massachusetts issue. This is, it's continuing to be a national, part of the national trend of meltdown that we have our economy.
Well, possibly, as management of the town and so on, of course, that's going to affect us as well, and
yes.
Cuts are going to have to take place, and shortly we'll know how deep and how serious it's going to be. We should know, I believe, I've been told that we possibly will have figures as early next week.
Yes, the governor also stated that he's going to be coming to us looking for the expanded authority, which is what everyone refers to as the 9C cuts. So he's going to be seeking that authority. Without this, he only has authority to cut the administrative accounts in the executive branch under his control. By us giving him the authority, he can then go into the courts, the sheriff's offices, to the various departments throughout the entire state budget, and he can bring the budget into balance, which we are much better off doing it now rather than waiting. I think, as you know, the longer you wait, the deeper the cuts have to be because you have a shorter period of time to make it up.
True.
So we're hoping that whatever adjustments that can be made now will hopefully set us straight for this year. Then the problem is next year.
True. As I stated before in prior meetings, that we're looking at a couple of years that are going to be, tough years to get through.
Yeah.
Before we see the sun coming up on the horizon.
Yeah, it's too bad because last year, towards the end, I came to Auburn, and I know other senators went around to their cities and towns and told everyone about the tough fiscal times that were facing us, and to try to make cuts, make their government try to streamline, make their local administrations as efficient as possible, because next year would be worse. Every year the state government always talks about cuts and that we know it's going to be a lean year. Then there's always that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, which was the stimulus. The stimulus came in. It brought the local aid levels up. I mean, Auburn for the first time was at the foundation level funding for education. So we were able to come forward with that money with the federal stimulus. We don't have that for next year. So there's no pot of gold that we're going to be able to access.
Right. I mean, the problem is that the majority of government, whether it be the schools or the municipal side of government, is pretty much bare bones. Yeah. And so on. So, where do you cut other than go without?
Yeah, and most cities and towns, it's personnel. That's the only place you can go to cut. And we are trying, we're continuing to look at healthcare. to see if we, you at the federal level, which that's a very complicated issue. But what they do in the federal level could affect us with all the reforms we made 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So, but everyone is watching right now to see the implications of that, and hopefully that we can try to reduce some costs to the cities and towns.
Well, Senator, it certainly has been an interesting few weeks on Beacon Hill. Since we last spoke, you had to take a few very difficult votes during that time. In the wake of Senator Kennedy's passing, the legislature changed the law to allow the governor to appoint an interim U.S. senator until a special election can be held. How did you vote on that, and why?
Well, as you know, when that law was changed 5 years ago, we had a Republican governor, Mitt Romney, and based on a letter from Senator Kennedy, the legislature changed the law, removing the authority of the governor to make an appointment. We spent so much focus this past spring on ethics reform. There was a lot of issues in the previous year, prior to me being elected, with potential scandals and the integrity of the legislature, that there's a big emphasis put on trying to restore the faith in Boston, in Beacon Hill, and the legislature. So we did an ethics reform package. Now, I saw this vote as being basically a slap in the face to that, because this legislation was well intended, but it was pretty much a partisan issue. And I thought this took away from all the reforms that we tried to make. I voted against it. I was one of 11 Democrats to vote against giving the governor the authority to do this. The vote was roughly 24 to 16. So you had the 11 Democrats, then you had the 5 Republicans. Actually, the makeup of the vote for the Worcester County, you had myself, Senator Richard Moore, Senator Brewer, Stephen Brewer, and were the 4 senators who voted, and Senator Jen Flanagan, who voted against the measure. The 2, Senator Chandler and Eldridge, were the only 2 senators to go vote in favor of it. So from Central Mass, you had a majority of the senators that voted against this initiative. One thing that has recently developed is Senator Stanley Rosenberg, which is from the Amherst area. And actually, I did sign on to this. He's actually filed legislation to make the process part of the state constitution. So this way, if a year from now or 2 years from now, the same issue comes up, if Senator Kerry or whoever backfills Senator Kennedy's seat goes to leave and we have this dilemma again, if it's part of the state constitution, we won't have this issue again. The process will be in the constitution, and it will stay that way, and we won't be able to flip-flop on the issue. Won't be flip-flop on again.
Okay. In addition to this issue, of course, there has to be an election.
Yes.
You need a primary, which is to be held in December. You need an election, which is in January. There's a cost factor to each city and town, and the money's in the town's budgets for this, so it has to come out of monies from elsewhere in order to hold the elections.
Right. Yeah. No, this is going to put added pressure on the local communities, because it's not just one election. You've got 2. You've got the primary and then the general election. So there is an added cost. There's also been some requests to allow local referendums, or town meeting articles, I should say, to be put on the local ballots. So that's being discussed. I know the Secretary of State right now is not in favor of that, and he's got some pretty good justification. If Auburn was to have say like an override request, which they're not, but say Auburn had something of a local issue that was going to be on the ballot, if you have that issue and the Senate race on the same ballot, if there was for some reason someone was protesting the vote in Auburn, the Secretary of State wouldn't be able to certify the U.S. Senate results until the protest was heard and decided upon in that local municipality. So he's actually stated that these local scanners or the machines, voting machines that the towns use, cities and towns use, could be set up where you could have 2 ballots. So that's another initiative that's been discussed.
I understand that there's been an update in your pursuit of the K-9 grant for the town of Auburn. For those of you who don't know, Senator Moore has had some success in pursuing a grant for the Auburn Police Department's K-9 program. What's going on with that, Senator Moore?
Well, Auburn's been very active as far as their K-9 program, and I think we discussed it briefly at the last show. They applied for a grant that would allow for a school safety program utilizing K-9s, the dogs. It's a $58,000 grant. It would cover the training, a cruiser, and I think maybe some overtime costs. Auburn, there was some potential hurdles that we had to overcome where you had some statewide agencies that might not want the grant to go this way. But working with the Secretary of Public Safety and the administration, we were able to get Auburn the approval for this grant. So Auburn now will add this function to the K-9 program. They'll be able to go into the schools, and it's for looking for explosive firearms. It's part of the Homeland Security funding that's been available. And one area that made Auburn much more appealing to the state was the fact that you've got the Central Mass Law Enforcement Council, CEMLAC as they call it. So I think it's 30 to 32 communities that's part of this. So this dog or K-9 program will be utilized throughout the entire community, all 32 communities. So it's a good program. It's going to bring a lot of recognition to the town of Auburn and the excellent job that they've done.
Moving on, you recently hosted an event regarding ethics geared towards local officials. I'm going to ask you to tell us about the event, but you set it up, but you got tied up, I know, in a vote in Boston last night. I did attend the meeting. It was approximately 2 hours long and was very informative. A lot of the things you take for granted, but there's some things that were brought to people's attention that lead people to questioning whether they're doing things in the right manner. Would like to perhaps expound on any of this?
Well, that's actually why we were sponsoring these training sessions. We had one in Worcester last week. And last night was Auburn. We have one in Shrewsbury next week at the library. I think it's October 22nd, or one day next week. With all the reforms we made with the ethics reforms last spring, I wanted to keep people apprised of what their obligations are going to be. It was quite interesting because of the opinions that you're getting from the Ethics Commission on what an employee is. I think you found this out last night. Mm-hmm. People who volunteer at the senior centers are, in their opinion, employees. A poll worker is an employee. So these are all people now who are going to have to go through the ethics training or certification process.
Oh, well, excuse me. One of the points that was made last night that there is something like 400,000 employees in the state of Massachusetts amongst the 351 towns, including all of these people, and they're going to refine that list because they feel that some of them can be exempt from it, but they haven't decided. You have one person, the head of this program, and he only has 2 hands, and he held them up and saying, "This is all I have."
He may have one hand after this next round of budget cuts.
So that number possibly could be brought down to by 100,000, but there's an awful lot of people that need to be brought up to date on this program, and there will be a test of 25 questions that was explained to us last night that needs to be taken. You can take it right over the internet. It's not something that's hard. You're given, I believe it's five answers to each question, and if you answer it wrong, you get the chance to get it correct before you go on to the next question. So it's not anything that you're taking a test and you're going to flunk. It's just to make you aware
Right.
of what's going on and what you need to do to adhere to what's required of you in the position that you're in.
I mean, it was actually quite surprising. Now, I've been a state employee. Again, prior to being elected to this office, I was with the sheriff's office and formerly with the state environmental police, and I was very active in the union. I didn't realize until the training last week that the way it's defined, that if you're a public employee and you call in sick and you're not sick, that's actually an ethics violation. They can go after you for an ethics violation. Yeah, yes, I knew it was, you could be disciplined from the Commonwealth or your employer. I never realized it fell underneath the guise of the Ethics Commission.
Yeah, they brought up last night the fact that, you're in campaign season and you got a friend that's out there running for office and so on, and you call in sick, and then they find you out there on the street holding a sign for an individual, and supposedly you're homesick, and
Yeah.
that's an ethics violation.
Yeah. I never realized that before. I always just thought it was something that the state could come back and discipline you for, suspend you or put you on leave. But I never realized they could fine you civilly or go after you through an ethics violation. So,
And they can go back. I believe it said 5 years last night. Even if
that I'm
you've
not
left,
sure. Okay.
even if you've left office and are no longer an official, you can still be held responsible. They can go after you for violations going back as many as 5 years.
Yeah, that is true. They would tell if it's part of your responsibilities, if you are privy to confidential information, even after you leave, you can't divulge that information. Your responsibilities stay with you.
Correct. The other thing is that if you're sitting in a meeting and you feel that you're in conflict with something, the best thing to do is to recuse yourself and leave the room, and to make sure that it becomes part of the notes in
Yes.
case something comes up 3 or 4 years down the road and you're questioned on how a position that you took, and it's on record that you did.
Leave, yeah. Yeah, you want to make sure it's part of the minutes of the meeting, so
Correct.
it's recorded. And one important part about this also is that this is no longer enforced by the DA's office, the District Attorney's office. The Attorney General's office now, with this, is going to have the power of enforcing the open meeting law. So when it goes back to what you're saying, like a conflict for leaving a meeting, that was all part of the change too. So it's going to be a lot of responsibility now put on the Attorney General's office, assuming all the DAs, I don't want to say they were more than happy to get rid of this, or to have this authority transferred over, but there's a lot of complaints that come in regarding this. And part of the ethics law, and I think they went over this, it's not just the act, if you do it, but if it's the reasonable appearance of a violation. So even if you're not doing something wrong, but someone, based on the appearance of your conduct, that could be a violation. So.
I understand that Auburn stands to benefit from the recent grant award from the state geared towards cultural councils.
Yes, Packagug Community Music School received a $2,000 grant, so hopefully that will help them out in the near future with their programs.
And you recently became involved in issues dealing with the Fair Share Contribution Program. Can you tell us what's going on with that and how you were involved in it?
Well, as the chair of the Community Development Small Business Committee, we've been touring the state, meeting with the chambers of commerce and other small business groups, trying to find out what's impacting them right now. 80% of businesses in Massachusetts are small business. So if we're going to have a recovery, we really need to support small business and try to find out what's impacting them right now. So to pursue this, we've had forums. We've had them in Worcester, down the Cape. We're heading up to the North Shore next week. And one of the issues that started coming up to us was the health insurance. That when they had the healthcare reform, there's a section of the healthcare reform that requires businesses to contribute 33% of the premium costs, or you have to show 25% of your employees are covered. The or was up until in January. In January, the regulations were changed where it had to be and or. It had to be and. You had to do the 33% and show the 25%, what they call the uptake rate. When this change was made, you've now had businesses, and it really actually just focuses it on one sector of businesses, which are temporary staffing, restaurants, seasonal employees. And what it is that you own a temporary staffing agency. The state's coming in and doing audits, and they're seeing that you have 15 employees. Once you get over the 11 employees, you have to offer coverage or show 25%. Now, the intent of the law was to make sure people had access and was receiving quality health care. Businesses were being audited and fined because they didn't have the form showing that they offered out the insurance. There's one company that I always use for an example. They had roughly 15 employees. All 15 employees were temporary employees, but they all had coverage through their spouse. The Commonwealth came in, saw that they had coverage, but the company from 2006, 2007 didn't have the form showing the sign-off that the person was offered it. They were fined, they were fined $15,000 to $18,000. When we started looking into this, it turns out we've got other companies in Worcester a healthcare company that's getting fined $24,000. We've got a janitorial services company that's $16,000. I met with a company the other day, yesterday actually, they came into my office. They're getting a $100,000 fine. And some of these companies actually had professionals coming in, looking at their process on how they were offering health care, and they actually thought they were in compliance with the laws. Another problem that we were having with this is the Department of Unemployment Assistance, DUA, has a customer assistance line or a citizen assistance line. You would call if you had any questions. The person at the other end of the phone was an auditor. So if you called up and said, "Look, I forgot this question. This is what's going on," the auditor is the one that's answering the phone. So the question is, are they people who are trying to show good faith in compliance with the law? Are they now speaking to an auditor who's now coming auditing them? And the website, and this is basically what happened to this person yesterday. The website that the state operates for this, if you're typing in the information, most websites have, after you're done, you can hit a little box that's basically you're certifying the information is correct before it's submitted. Well, the system they have is if you make a mistake, once you input that information, there's no box at the end. It's in. You can't change it. So, and by the time the form is done, the system is telling you whether you're in violation or whether there's a penalty assessment, and then it's getting referred to the audit division. So people are getting audited that don't. They may have made a typo error in submitting the information. So, and there's four auditors right now in the Commonwealth that they have going throughout the state, and there's questions as to whether they actually have a set procedure. You and I could be going doing audits. You follow one procedure, I'm following another procedure. So we're trying to work with them also, trying to get a standardized process that they're going to use. So there's been a lot of issues going on with this. We had a meeting with myself, Senator Chandler, Senator Tucker from I think it was the Wilmington area. We had a meeting with Healthcare Finance and the Department of Unemployment Assistance, brought some of these issues up. Right now we're being told that they have suspended audits of these types of businesses from the year 2006 to 2007. But the problem is you've got companies who have appealed fines that have been assessed. So we'd like to have the state go back and look at these appeals. And basically, the situation where if you've got a company that is providing health care or making sure their employees have health care, they just don't have that waiver signed off, they shouldn't be getting fined. I mean, the health care law was a very confusing law. If you want to write them a letter saying, we found you in violation of this, next year make sure you're in compliance, and not fine them, that's fine. But the intent of this was not my opinion, the intent of this whole reform wasn't to raise revenue. It was to provide health care costs coverage to the people.
You recently, and I read in the paper, received a couple of awards. One from the Massachusetts Nurses Association, the other from the Mass Coalition of Police. Can you tell us about these awards?
Yeah, actually, it was nice. I was could call down to the Cape. The Mass Nurses Association elected me their Freshman Legislator of the Year for this year. So
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. It was nice. I've handled a few issues for them. There's an assault and battery bill on healthcare professionals that we filed, and I signed on to the safe staffing bill, which is trying to establish a ratio of nurses to patients so that you don't have staff that are overburdened with an obviously too large of a patient caseload. And we've had there was another issue with some of the hospitals where they were looking at if they had some bedding issues, they would move someone from the hospital room to the hallway and temporarily keep them in the hallway while they were waiting to start the discharge process. So there's been several issues that we worked on for them, which then they acknowledged me for my efforts as far as this goes. And then the Mass Coalition of Police for the law enforcement community, they actually called me and I was given their Legislator of the Year award, which was nice.
Very good. I've just been notified that we've got less than 5 minutes left.
Okay.
So, you recently launched a new website for your office, www.michaelomore.com, which went up a few weeks ago. Can you tell the people about the new site?
Yeah, with the campaign coming to an end last fall, we now had to revamp the site. We've got legislation we filed, what our priorities are, issues that we think will be coming up. It's a pretty informative site. It's interactive. So we've got the ability to establish a newsletter. So if anybody wants to sign up onto the website, we can periodically give you newsletters that will be coming up or updates as far as what's going on in the legislature. So yeah, I would ask anyone to go on it. Again, it's very interactive and informative. So I think most people find it interesting.
Okay. We only have like a couple of minutes left, and I don't know if you want to touch on anything from the budget from the Policy Center or anything briefly.
Well, I think, man, just as we stated earlier, I mean, it might be a good idea our next show maybe to go into the budget as far as how much money goes into Health and Human Services, how much money goes into public safety, how much is going into economic development. This way people get an understanding of where we're going, how the money is, all the tax revenue coming in, how that's being utilized. One thing we didn't discuss earlier was in discussions that are coming up about next fiscal year, they're saying we possibly could have to cut another $3 billion from the state budget. So those fiscal year cuts that we were talking about, it may equate to $3 billion for next year. So it's going to be devastating. So.
Okay, I know it's unofficial at this point, but and I don't want to mention any names, but we've had someone express an interest in being a guest at a future meeting, and
oh, yes,
depending upon the time frame, perhaps depending upon what transpires at the next meeting, we might have a guest with us.
Yes, okay, that's actually a great idea. I forgot about that. That is true. And I think you'll all enjoy meeting him. He's another elected official that wants to come out and introduce himself to everyone in Auburn. So.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up for today.
And thank you again for having me here. And again, if anyone has any questions or issues that they want us to discuss on this show, please feel free to call my office or even email the website. My office number is 617-722-1485. And my email address would be michael.o.moore@state.ma.us. And again, if there's any specific issue, please don't hesitate. Let us know. We can try to discuss it. Bring it up here. Thank you.